a desert sunset, a dream hike, and the love of your life by your side. But in Joshua Tree, paradise turned deadly. Sarah and James vanished without a trace until a hollow tree revealed a dark secret. What they uncovered changed everything we thought we knew about safety in our national parks. Sarah Martinez and James Cooper were the kind of couple that made their friends believe in true love. Sarah, 28, worked as a graphic designer in Los Angeles, her creative spirit drawn to the beauty in everyday moments. James, 30, was a software engineer whose logical mind perfectly balanced Sarah's artistic soul. They'd been together for 3 years, and those who knew them best whispered about engagement rings and wedding plans. In October 2010, they decided to escape the hustle of city life for a long weekend in Joshua Tree National Park. The desert landscape had always fascinated Sarah. She'd filled sketchbooks with drawings of the park's otherworldly rock formations and twisted trees. James, ever the planner, had researched the best hiking trails and camping spots, even downloading offline maps to his phone. "This is going to be our adventure," Sarah had told her sister Elena the night before they left. "Just me, James, and all that beautiful emptiness." They packed their small blue Honda Civic with camping gear, plenty of water, and Sarah's beloved camera, a vintage film model that James had given her for her birthday. The last photo on her phone, posted to social media, showed them grinning at each other across their kitchen table, camping gear spread around them like treasure. The caption read, "Joshua Tree, here we come." The couple arrived at Joshua Tree on Friday afternoon, October 15th, checking in at the park's west entrance. The ranger on duty that day was Paul Whitman, a 15-year veteran of the National Park Service who'd transferred to Joshua Tree 3 years earlier. At 45, Whitman was known among his colleagues as dedicated but increasingly isolated, divorced, no children, living alone in park housing. Security footage from the entrance station shows Sarah and James laughing as they received their park map and camping information. Sarah's bright smile caught Whitman's attention immediately. He spent longer than usual explaining the park's features, his eyes following Sarah as she pointed excitedly at different locations on the map. "Have a safe trip," Whitman told them, his gaze lingering on Sarah even as James thanked him and started to drive away. The couple set up camp at Hidden Valley Campground, a popular spot surrounded by massive rock formations. Their neighbors that weekend would later tell investigators that Sarah and James seemed blissfully happy, cooking together over their camp stove, Sarah photographing the sunset while James read beside their tent. On Saturday morning, they set out for what would become their final hike. October 16th dawned clear and cool, perfect hiking weather. Sarah and James planned to explore the Skull Rock area, a moderate trail known for its fascinating geological formations. Sarah packed her camera with fresh film, while James filled their water bottles and checked his GPS device. They were last seen alive at 10:30 a.m. by a family from Arizona who remembered them because Sarah had offered to take their photo at the Skull Rock landmark. "They seemed so in love," the father would later tell police. "The kind of couple you notice because they were genuinely enjoying each other's company." What happened next remained a mystery for 7 long years. When Sarah and James failed to return to their campsite that evening, fellow campers grew concerned. By Sunday morning, when their tent remained empty and their car sat untouched, someone called park rangers. Paul Whitman was among the first to respond to the missing persons report. The search for Sarah and James became one of the most extensive in Joshua Tree's history. Park rangers, local law enforcement, search and rescue volunteers, and even military personnel combed thousands of acres of desert terrain. Helicopters circled overhead, while ground teams checked every cave, crevice, and hidden valley. Paul Whitman seemed particularly invested in the search, volunteering for overtime shifts and staying late to coordinate with other agencies. His colleagues noted his dedication, though some found his intensity slightly odd. Paul was always thorough, remembered fellow ranger Maria Santos, but with this case, he seemed almost obsessed. He'd stay at the command post long after his shift ended, studying maps, suggesting new search areas. Days turned into weeks. Sarah's family flew in from Texas, while James's parents drove from Oregon. They held press conferences, distributed flyers, and offered a reward for information. Elena Martinez, Sarah's sister, practically lived at the park, refusing to give up hope. "They're experienced hikers," she told reporters. "They wouldn't just get lost. Something happened to them." The family's instincts were right, but the truth was hiding in plain sight. As months passed without a trace, the case grew cold. The couple's Honda Civic was processed for evidence, but revealed nothing suspicious. Their campsite showed no signs of struggle. It was as if Sarah and James had simply vanished into the desert air. Theories abounded. Some suggested they'd fallen into a hidden mine shaft. The area was dotted with abandoned mining operations. Others wondered if they'd been victims of foul play, perhaps encountered by someone with criminal intentions. The most painful theory for their families was that they'd gotten lost, succumbed to the desert, and their bodies were simply too well hidden to find. Paul Whitman continued working at the park, his performance reviews noting his dedication to visitor safety. He received a commendation in 2012 for his work on search and rescue operations. To everyone around him, he was a model ranger. But Whitman was harboring a terrible secret. The truth was that his interest in Sarah had developed into an obsession after that brief encounter at the entrance station. He'd noticed her social media posts about the trip, had memorized her face from the camping registration. On that Saturday morning, instead of patrolling his assigned area, he'd followed the couple to Skull Rock. In September 2017, a routine trail maintenance crew was working near the Skull Rock area when they made a horrifying discovery. One of the workers, cutting away dead branches from a large Joshua tree, noticed something unusual inside a hollow section of the trunk. "At first, I thought it was just old camping gear someone had stuffed in there," maintenance worker Roberto Cruz would later testify. "But then I saw what looked like fabric, and I realized it was something much worse." The discovery sent shockwaves through the park and the investigation community. After 7 years, Sarah and James had been found less than a quarter-mile from where they were last seen alive. The location was particularly chilling because search teams had passed that very tree countless times during the original investigation. The hollow was positioned in such a way that it wasn't visible from the main trail, and the bodies had been carefully concealed with branches and debris. Forensic investigators descended on the scene, treating it with the care of archaeologists uncovering ancient artifacts. What they found painted a disturbing picture of the couple's final moments. Both Sarah and James had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, indicating they'd been murdered. Sarah's beloved camera was found with them, its film still intact after 7 years in the desert. When developed, the photos told a heartbreaking story. Images of their happy camping trip, their hike that morning, and finally, several photos that Sarah had apparently taken during their final, terrifying encounter. The last photos on the roll showed a figure in a park ranger uniform approaching them. The images were partially obscured and taken from odd angles, suggesting Sarah had tried to document what was happening while hiding or running. But it was James's GPS device that provided the most crucial evidence. Despite 7 years of desert conditions, investigators were able to extract data showing the couple's exact movements that day. including their final location and the timeline of events. The investigation, now a homicide case, took on new urgency. Detectives began re-examining everyone who'd had contact with the couple during their stay. Paul Whitman's name came up repeatedly. He'd been involved in the initial search, had access to the area where they were found, and had detailed knowledge of the park's hidden locations. When investigators looked deeper into Whitman's background, disturbing patterns emerged. Co-workers remembered his unusual interest in the case. His work logs showed he'd been in the Skull Rock area on the day the couple disappeared, despite being assigned to patrol a different section of the park. When confronted with the evidence, Paul Whitman initially denied involvement. But as the forensic evidence mounted, his fingerprints found on items at the scene, fibers from his uniform that matched evidence found with the bodies, his story began to crumble. During his third interrogation, Whitman finally broke down and confessed to the murders. According to his statement, Whitman had become obsessed with Sarah after their brief encounter at the entrance station. He'd looked up her social media profiles, studied her photos, and convinced himself that she was being mistreated by James. In his twisted mind, he believed he could rescue her. According to his statement, Whitman had become obsessed with Sarah after their brief encounter at the entrance station. He'd looked up her social media profiles, studied her photos, and convinced himself that she was being mistreated by James. In his twisted mind, he believed he could rescue her. On that Saturday morning, he'd followed them to Skull Rock, watching from a distance as they hiked and took photos. When he finally approached them, claiming to be conducting a routine safety check, James had become suspicious of Whitman's behavior and had tried to leave with Sarah. "I just wanted to talk to her," Whitman said in his confession. "But he wouldn't let me. He said I was acting inappropriate, that he was going to report me. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't lose my job. I couldn't lose her." The confrontation had escalated quickly. Whitman struck James with a large rock, then turned on Sarah when she tried to run. The crime scene photos from her camera captured her final desperate attempt to document her attacker. Paul Whitman was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The trial, which began in March 2018, riveted the nation and sparked conversations about safety in national parks and the screening of park employees. The prosecution painted a picture of a lonely, disturbed man who had abused his position of trust to stalk and murder 2 innocent people. The defense tried to argue for a lesser charge, claiming Whitman had suffered a mental breakdown, but the premeditated nature of his actions, following the couple, hiding their bodies, participating in the search while knowing exactly where they were, undermined their case. Sarah's camera photos were particularly powerful evidence. The jury saw her final moments through her own eyes, watching as she tried desperately to document the man who would become her killer. Elena Martinez, Sarah's sister, gave victim impact statements that brought the courtroom to tears. "Sarah was trying to leave evidence," she said. "Even in her final moments, she was thinking about justice, about making sure whoever did this wouldn't get away with it. That's the kind of person she was. Brave, smart, always thinking of others." James's father spoke about the 7 years of not knowing, the sleepless nights, the false hopes when tips came in. "We never stopped looking for them," he said. "We never stopped believing we'd bring them home. Paul Whitman stole that from us. He stole 7 years of our lives, and he stole all the years Sarah and James should have had together." In August 2018, after just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Paul Whitman guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Margaret Chen, in delivering the sentence, noted the particularly heinous nature of the crime. "You not only murdered 2 innocent people," she told Whitman, but you then participated in the search for them, comforting their families while knowing exactly what you had done. You used your position as a park ranger, a position of trust and protection, to commit these horrible acts. The families of Sarah Martinez and James Cooper have shown remarkable strength throughout this ordeal, and while no sentence can bring back their loved ones, I hope this verdict provides some measure of justice. Whitman showed no emotion as the sentence was read. He was immediately taken into custody and transferred to a maximum security prison in California. The case led to significant changes in how the National Park Service screens and monitors its employees. New protocols were established for background checks, and regular psychological evaluations became mandatory for rangers working in isolated locations. Joshua Tree National Park installed additional safety measures, including emergency communication devices on popular trails and increased ranger patrols. The park also created a memorial garden for Sarah and James, a quiet spot where visitors can reflect on the importance of safety and the preciousness of life. Elena Martinez became an advocate for families of missing persons, working with law enforcement agencies to improve communication and support services. She established the Sarah Martinez Foundation, which provides resources for families dealing with missing loved ones cases. Sarah would want something good to come from this tragedy, Elena said at the foundation's launch. She'd want other families to have better support, better resources, and most importantly, better answers than we had for 7 long years. Today, Sarah and James are remembered not as victims, but as a couple who loved life, loved each other, and loved exploring the natural world. Their story serves as both a tragedy and a reminder of the importance of vigilance, even in places we consider safe. The Joshua Tree where their bodies were found has become an informal memorial site. Park visitors often leave flowers, stones, or small mementos, though the Park Service discourages this practice to preserve the natural environment Sarah and James loved so much. Their families have found some peace in knowing the truth, though the pain of their loss remains. "At least now we know what happened," said James's mother, Patricia Cooper. "For 7 years, we lived in limbo, always wondering, always hoping they might walk through the door. It was horrible not knowing, but it was also horrible learning the truth. At least now we can properly grieve." The case also highlighted the vulnerability of park visitors and the trust placed in Park Service employees. While incidents like this remain extremely rare, Sarah and James's story changed how both parks and visitors approach safety in wilderness areas. The story of Sarah Martinez and James Cooper is ultimately about trust betrayed, love lost, and justice delayed but not denied. Their final photos, taken in moments of terror, became the key to solving their own murder, a testament to Sarah's quick thinking even in the face of unimaginable horror. Paul Whitman remains in prison, having been denied parole twice. He has never expressed remorse for his actions and continues to maintain that he was trying to help Sarah. Mental health experts who have evaluated him describe a man unable to accept responsibility for his actions, lost in delusions that led to devastating consequences. The hollow Joshua Tree where Sarah and James were found still stands, a silent witness to both tragedy and the resilience of nature. New growth has filled in around the hollow, slowly healing the scar where 2 lives were hidden for 7 long years. For their families, every October brings renewed grief, but also a celebration of the love Sarah and James shared. They were planning to get engaged that Christmas. James had confided to his brother just weeks before the trip. Sarah had already started a Pinterest board for wedding ideas, though she thought she was being subtle about it. These dreams, like their lives, were cut short by one man's twisted obsession. But their story lives on as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, Love persists, truth eventually emerges, and justice, though sometimes delayed, will find its way. In the desert silence of Joshua Tree, where the wind still whispers through the ancient trees and the stars shine as brightly as they did on that last night Sarah and James spent together, their memory endures. They came seeking adventure and beauty, and though they found tragedy instead, their legacy has made the wilderness a little safer for all who follow.